Well, Chris, the preseason is winding down tonight as we speak, which means 53-man roster cuts are coming up momentarily. And the question I have, and I think most of Chiefs Kingdom has, is who are the wide receivers that are going to make the cut? So let's talk about it. For this purpose, I've got four guys being absolute locks, with the Chiefs probably keeping six on the roster. So we got about 4, 5, 6 guys we're going to talk about that could get that final one or two spots. But let's start with the locks. Obviously, Marquise Brown got the injury concern. He's going to be on the team. Might miss a few games, but he's a lock. Rashee Rice, easy lock. Still no talk on what might happen with the suspension. For all things we know, he's playing the full year. Absolute lock. Chiefs first round draft pick, Xavier Worthy. Duh, obvious lock. Can't wait to see how he looks on the field in the real offense coming up here in a couple weeks. And then I'm going to say Justin Watson is your number 4 lock for sure. He's one of Mahomes' most trusted guys in the system last couple of years. A guy that does a little bit of this, a little bit of that. He's not going anywhere. So that leaves us with a handful of guys who I'm going to say they keep 6. I know last year there was the talk of 7, and I think they ended up 7 to start the year, and then that switched up. But the guys that are on the bubble list, I'm going to read them off all to you, and then we just feel free to dive in with which ones you like, which ones you feel iffy on. Then I've got my own. Obvious one, Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, McCole Hardman, late summer edition or re-addition to the team again. Everyone's camp favorite from last year, Justin Ross. Everyone's maybe potential camp favorite of this year, Nico Remigio. And then I'm going to throw Luis Rees-Zammit in this, even though he's probably more gadget running back player, but he has gotten some run at receiver the last couple of days, last couple of weeks in practice. So those are the guys. Let's get into it. The Chiefs keep 2. If it was up to you, who are you keeping? Who are you cutting, trading, letting go? What's the move here?
I think if I'm picking, Justin Ross because he gives you something different, and then Remigio because Tobe likes him so much as a special teams player, which I think is huge. So those would be my two, like just easy peasy. It doesn't seem like that's gonna be the Chiefs go, because I thought that was interesting that Sky Moore is not playing in the final preseason game, while McCole Hardman and some of these the rest of these guys are, which leads me to believe that they're leaning more, but that seems crazy to me. It also doesn't feel like I think you said earlier, like Toney could find a way to sneak on. But if it's me and I just get to pick based on what I've seen, what I think this team needs, it has to be Justin Ross and Remigio. Can't even say his name.
I like saying Regio because it's easier.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think I really differ much from you there. I think the two that probably have the biggest question mark because of potential talent, I think, are Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore. Two guys you invested higher draft capital on. McCole Hardman you can throw in there, but that's several years back now of that draft capital. But Sky Moore, you bring him in a couple years ago, hasn't really done much. He was supposed to be this new kind of gadget player that could fit different roles on special teams and slot receiver and this and that, speed, jet sweep, all that kind of stuff, and just hasn't really lived up to on the field. So then they go get a guy like Kadarius Toney, who just on paper and in theory one of the most electric playmaking type receivers, but a guy that can't stay healthy, can't get on the field. Every chance he gets, he bobbles his opportunities, pun intended there, as we saw last year. But there hasn't really been a lot of favorable talk on Kadarius Toney this season. Now, the Chiefs have still played it pretty close to heart. They've said, hey, he's incredibly talented. We love what he can bring to this offense. But Matt Nagy last week was going, he's got to get on the field and play. He's got to get some time to actually show what he's capable of to see if it's worth it. And we just haven't seen that time. So he's really got an uphill battle. Sky Moore, I think, in the same position. He, to me, screams needs a new change of scenery. Kind of like the I'm going to butcher his name, but Smith Marset from last year.
Oh yeah.
Just didn't fit on the roster, but an easy, let's just trade him for something and get something back. Different situation because Sky Moore, I don't think, has a place on this team, but he feels like a guy that's going to get moved because he just hasn't done enough to solidify a role. McCole Hardman, I think, is, to me, the one, if I had to place a bet, the one I'd feel the most confident coming back just because the previous experience. Because why bring him in midsummer if you don't plan on keeping him? But the guys that stand out to me, like you said, there's Remigio and Justin Ross. Remigio could be the next special teams ace. He's been the guy that's been playing that role the most this offseason. He's got a long look there. Dave Tobe loves him, and we know how much Dave Tobe has influence on the bottom of the roster with the final 53. So I love that there. Personally, I still love Justin Ross. I know he hasn't done a ton yet to to gain any favoritism in the depth chart per se, but the guy still has a ton of potential. He's got the athleticism, big body. I've been saying this for the last couple of years. I'd love to see the Chiefs get a guy that can catch the ball down the field. That's a big target. And we had a guy like MVS in that's a big target, but just could run fast and couldn't catch. Demarcus Robinson, same thing. So a guy that really has the skill set to catch a ball downfield. So I love that. And then again, LZR, I think he's more of a, probably doesn't make the 53, but could be an interesting guy to keep an eye on just from a special teams perspective, gadget player. Ross and Remigio, I think you go a little bit more athleticism there.
Yeah, the thing with Ross too is like for people that have been listening to us for a while know that like I wasn't high on Ross last year, but it was completely different circumstances. Last year, everyone was talking about Ross being the number 1 or 2. And so I was just like, I thought that was insane. Insane to suggest, regardless of what the wide receiver was putting out. Now you just need him to be 5 or 6, almost be like Jordy Fortson was from the from the tight end position, but now use Ross as a wide receiver, like have a few set plays, form set packages, run him down deep a little bit, jump ball, and that's all you need. You don't need him to be out there. The thing that they're going to run into is like, I agree with you with like, it feels like Hardman's going to be a lock. And if Hardman doesn't make it, it feels like more Toney just because of the draft capital. Like one of those 3 is going to make it from just what they've invested. And then the other spot is going to be a Ross or someone else like that. And so it doesn't feel like they both can make the roster, which is because Ross can't do anything on special teams. And when you don't provide anything on special teams, it limits what you're looking for from your wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6.
Yeah, and I go again, we're talking about the lower end of the depth chart here for wide receiver, and that's a good problem to have. If you're complaining about who's the 5th, 6th guy on the field there, then I think your wide receiver group's really good. And honestly, this wide receiver core has the potential, top to bottom, to be Mahomes' best wide receiver group he's ever had in the Chiefs. Now, it might not be the most productive on the field because Tyreek Hill had just an insane year. That 2018 year, him and Sammy Watkins, even though Watkins' statistics weren't necessarily up there, they had an insane year. But there wasn't much depth outside of that. This year, you've got the depth and you've got lots of options, but you've got 3 guys that most fans feel like should be locks to be big influence in the offense. But yeah, I guess the one I have is, the case of Hardman, Toney, or Remigio. And I know you've kind of talked on it, but why would you take Remigio? Like if the option was one of those 3, why take Remigio over the other 2?
Just because he like we've been talking about it. Tobe loves him, which means that the dude can play on special teams. I do worry a little bit about how he's shown more in camp than he has actually on the field. But regardless, like if you're the special teams coordinator is loving on you, you can return, you can be a gunner, you can play on kickoff. Like if you can do all those things, what more could you ask for? It's like Marcus Kemp, only slightly better because Marcus Kemp couldn't return. He didn't have the speed to, or Remigio does. So like that's kind of what you're getting. Like I think Tobe said he was going to be fighting for him to make this roster. And so I think that, like, again, gun to my head, make me pick 2. I think it's Hardman and Remigio just from everything we've heard and just kind of seen over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I think the other thing you have to look at from a roster manipulation perspective is which of these guys can you get by hiding on the practice squad versus the guys that you're like, man, I just can't take a chance. If Remigio is one of those guys that are around the league, you feel like there's a lot of chatter that they really like a spot for him. Well, maybe he's a guy you move for something, 5th, 6th, 7th round pick, something to get something back. Or maybe he's a guy you have to keep on the initial 53 man, and you feel like a guy like Justin Ross can go back to your practice squad and work his way back up. But yeah, it feels like Sky Moore is the most obvious odd man out to me. There's just nothing, the body language of sorts, the way he's talked about from Chiefs camp the last couple of weeks. There's just like I would put it at a less than 10% chance that Sky Moore ends up on the roster, and maybe I'll end up being wrong. Who knows? It just feels like he's an obvious guy to get moved.
Him not playing in the final preseason game is wild to me. Like, is that because they're trying to trade him? Is that because they're that done with him? They've already made up their mind, or is he for some reason making this team because he was a 2nd round pick 2 years ago? Like, he's probably the one I'm interested to see the most of because, like, I'm with you. I would have thought that he was just kind of a, thanks, sorry it didn't work out on our way, like we see with draft picks all the time. But kind of him not playing this final preseason game has me intrigued on what the Chiefs actually have up their sleeve with Sky Moore.
Yeah. So speaking of potential scenarios, let's do this. Start, bench, cut. Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, McCole Hardman.
Man, that's hard because I'm not a Kadarius Toney truther, but I think along the lines of what the coaching staff has been telling us. Like the talent is just so hard to look past. It's between him and Hardman on the start. Hardman just drives me insane, but he works in this offense. He's got already his skill set. I think I'm gonna go as I'm talking it through. I'm gonna start Hardman, bench Toney, and cut Moore. I think that's where I'm gonna land. But I really am tempted to start Toney just because he's such a freak athletically.
Yeah, that's the kicker. It's the potential. The potential's there. He just can't get on the field and live up to the hype. I like that. I think I would go the same route. Start McCole Hardman, bench Kadarius Toney, and then trade or cut Sky Moore.
And how sad is that? I mean, McCole Hardman couldn't even stick around on the Jets, and we're sitting here being like, yeah, he's probably starting over our, for our
I wonder how much of it though is catching the game-winning Super Bowl touchdown gives him a little bit of an edge.
And he was bashing on the Jets, so no other team wanted him. So the Chiefs were the only one that would take him back. Like that's how far Toney has fallen. The fact that guy McCall Hardman can outshine him in our opinion.
Yeah. Well, we'll leave it there. Chiefs fans, let us know what you think. If the Chiefs keep 6, which is my prediction, who are those 2 guys that you think they end up with, and who are the 2 you'd like to see the most? Again, our prediction is it's probably a combination of, man, I don't even want to do this now because we talked about all 4 being options. I'm going to say the 2 they keep are going to be McCole Hardman, Justin Ross. That'll be my official prediction. After everything we just talked about, McCole Hardman, Justin Ross. Ross has the body. Hardman's got the experience and the consistency in the playbook.
Yeah, I'm going to go Hardman and Remigio just because none of those other guys really play special teams. So they're going to need somebody from there. So I don't know what they do with Justin Ross, but I want him on the team. I mean, he's probably the number 1 I want, but just if we're predicting on what the Chiefs are going to do, that's rifle.
I love it. We'll leave it there. 53-man roster cut down day is coming up here real soon. NFL season, preseason is almost over, which means week 1 is just a matter of weeks away with the Chiefs kicking off coming up in a couple of weeks against the Baltimore Ravens. Super excited for the season to get underway and can't wait to see the guys that make the initial cut and the guys that stick around. So when we come kickoff of game 1, it's back to 3-peat. So we'll wrap up there. Thank you guys, as always, for checking us out. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button below. And as always, go Chiefs.